What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast. I'm your host, Redkacheek, and this week, excited to bring a quick preview for the American Express being played in California, in La Quinta, California. Had a show recorded, and I had to pause it in the middle. So when I resumed it, apparently it only caught the second half when I exported it. So this is what we're going to do, though. I think it's going to work out good for you. What I had done in that show is obviously do the course preview like normal and then walk through FGB Studio. And I built, I think we put four or five models together and blended those and had a pretty good list to target for this week. What I'm going to do now is instead of going through an entire show again, I'm going to do just the course preview part to kind of get your feet wet for this week, hit on the high points of what I kind of landed on during that podcast, which will be this podcast. And hopefully that'll get you started. And then I will do a live show on Twitter and YouTube later Tuesday night, which is today. And then you can watch it on replay, obviously. So the goal is this one, I'll just talk about the golf course, talk about some key stats and stuff that we landed on. Very important concepts in terms of lead-in form and lead-in stats versus stats you see at a golf course or a golf tournament. And then obviously kind of my thought process for building out what we did on that show. But we'll do that in full capacity later tonight. So with that being said, let's go ahead and let me share this one. If you're listening on or any podcast channel, Spotify, Apple, whatever, I'll try to be as descriptive as I can. Just talking through the data should be fine, but this will get you started. So when you do come back to fantasygolfbag.com and hop into FGB Studio, you'll have a really good spot to start from in terms of which models to use, time frames, stats, weights, etc. So as always, start here at the Course Preview Pro. And we'll actually talk through this in a little bit different because the way the golf tournament is set up. So obviously the Pete Dye Stadium course is the primary course, or the host course is what they call it, for this event. I am going to hop over to the yardages and the golf course superintendent's sheet just to give you guys a little bit more clarity, and you guys can screenshot this or whatever you want to do. So obviously the stadium course is the only one with shot link. So when we look at Course Preview Pro, all the data there is there's some event related data like the minus 25 under par is 10 strokes better than the PGA Tour average cut line at 8.8, obviously attributed to the 3-round cut. But everything here, because of its strokes gained stuff, is related to the stadium course. But there's two other courses. So we have the adjusted strokes gained total. Obviously, we don't have shot link in terms of shots, approach shots, driving buckets, stuff like that. So everything for driving buckets, approach, for Course Preview Pro for the stadium course this week, it's just for that golf course. So I do want to bring you guys full circle with all the courses. So we got the PGA West Stadium course. Like I said, that's the host course. It's 72-10, plays about a stroke and a half under par. It was one of the easier courses. I think 2 years ago, it was very difficult up to a point. Guys hated it. It was kind of tricked up, really small greens. So compared to the Nicklaus course in La Quinta, it was just vastly different style. And what would happen is guys would get it on the wrong day. So this week, we'll look at weather here in a second. The weather this week looks phenomenal, like unbelievable. So if you can bet some unders on score props and overs on birdie props, you're going to be in good shape. And assuming, I haven't looked at all the prop numbers, but assuming they haven't caught up to where the weather's just absolutely the nuts this week, you're going to see some really good scores. I mean, we're talking like 1 to 2 miles per hour wind. Like, might as well bucket that at 0. It's perfect. And there's no rough. We'll talk about the rough and the course setup here in just a second. So stadium course, 72-10. PGA West Nicklaus course, par 72, 71-47, so a little bit shorter. And then La Quinta Country Club, also a par 72, 70-60, even shorter. There's the score. Like I said, there's the scorecard. You can screenshot this if you want. Par 5s are very scoreable in the stadium course. And obviously for the Nicholas course and La Quinta Country Club, there's a few other par fours that are very gettable. A lot of wedges into both of those courses, but the par fives guys just tear up. So look for two under par for the par fives per day at least. Let's look at the course setup. So this is the stadium course. First on the right hand side, if you're looking at my screen that I'm sharing, I'll make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Perfect. The things that I care about. So as far as the greens, like the speeds on all these PGA Tour courses outside of like Pebble Beach or any of the coastal courses where there's risk of wind, they're gonna stimp at 12 and a half, depending on what part of the season, and then maybe like which day. There's some courses that just suit better, like the Northeast later in the fall, that can be basically 13 on the stimp meter, possibly higher than that, depending on the course. But the thing that I want to look at is overseeded rough, non-overseeded rough, in the length. So you can see here the overseeded rough is at 1.5 inches. The overseeded rough is going to be a little bit heavier. That's kind of like this concerning thing. If this was overseeded rough at 4 inches, it would be awful. 1.5 is nothing. Non-overseeded rough is all the dormant Bermuda grass. They have it at 2 inches. Basically, the ball sits on top of this. The rough is not rough. It's honestly better than you can control the ball obviously better from the fairway, but non-overseeded rough is basically hitting off a mat. The ball sits up. The dry dormant rough is kind of like a sponge, and it just sits on top of it. So 1.5 for the overseeded rough. That's basically like the first cut. I wouldn't worry about that at all. And then obviously the non-overseeded rough is non-existent. If we go to like you can see the average fairway width, 33 yards. Guys just can hit it anywhere. There's really no concern with rough from that simple perspective. If we come over here to Jack Nicklaus tournament course, the exact same setup. Overseeded rough at 1.5 inches, non-overseeded rough at 2 inches. Again, just no concern with driving accuracy. Guys are going to bomb it and hit it all over the place on the par fives. There's a few holes, obviously, where position matters and being in the fairway with wedges matters, but large and away, there's no danger off the tee, and there's no risk from a strokes gain perspective when you hit it in the rough of losing a third of a stroke to the field. That doesn't exist here. And then this is on the right-hand side is La Quinta. Again, we got, they just list the rough ryegrass overseed at 1.75 inches, so just a tiny bit taller. They don't have a dormant, but I would imagine they do. Maybe they just didn't measure it. But all in all, that's like really the biggest storyline with this golf course. When you go here, it's like a resort style. You can hit it anywhere. The rough is not going to be penalizing. There's a lot of room to miss it. You can look at some of the videos that guys have posted already, and even the tee shots just look appealing, right? Like you have a nice landing strip, of green grass, and then you have all the dormant rough. And the rough is not, there's nothing to be concerned with. And in some ways, guys probably would prefer to hit it in that dormant rough, especially for their second shot into par fives. The ball sits up better, like I said. So without beating a dead horse, does that really play into it? I mean, not really. There's less emphasis on driving accuracy. So there's certain stats you can throw out. Does it really lead you down a certain path for researching this event? Not really. But I did want to point that out. That's kind of the biggest kicker for this golf course is the fact that it's basically it's not a pitch and putt. There's a lot of wedges, but it's basically drive it wherever you want, try to get in a position. But if you don't, it's okay. We're giving you a pat on the back. You'll be fine. There's really no danger here outside of the stadium course with a few of the water holes. I think that's pretty much it for those specific courses. We'll quickly look. The one thing I wanted to look at in Course Preview Pro is like the lead-in stats, and I want to talk about stats for like in the tournament versus lead-in. But let's look at what the weather is going to be this week. So let me refresh Weather IQ. Again, you can go to tools at fantasygolfbag.com, Weather IQ, and this has a breakdown of the tournament days, practice days, if you care about it. So for Thursday, we're talking about 3 miles per hour, gusting to 1, 3 to 3, 1 to 1, literally no gust. It does look like in the PM, which all these tee times, since there's 3 courses, they're tee off quite early. I don't think this is going to be a problem at all. 4 p.m. rain, 7 p.m. rain, obviously it's not going to happen. And the wind picks up a little bit there. This window here, 7 to 1 p.m., is basically where all the guys are playing because they're staggered and spread out across 3 courses. Friday, I think it was more of the same. Yeah, 5 miles per hour wind down to 1 and 2 in the afternoon. A little bit of rain, possibly. Not too concerned with that. It's pretty light anyways. It's nothing like the Sony we saw last week. And then one more for Saturday. Again, this is pretty early. We got 4 days away. A little bit windier on Saturday. So that could be something you look at for guys playing the stadium course on Saturday. Maybe you want to avoid that in some lineups. It's, as we see with weather all the time, you can overplay it a little bit. Obviously, there's sometimes where you underplay it and you feel like an idiot, but I think you can definitely overdo it of trying to be too greedy in stacking certain things or avoiding players just because they're teeing off on the stadium course on Saturday. So take that with a grain of salt. Consider all the possibilities. We got, a little bit of wind, and even this is pretty manageable. I mean, we're talking 10 to 15 miles per hour. It's not a big deal. But if, maybe this is wrong, there's some gusts later in the day, gusting to 26. Maybe that starts to creep up a little bit. We don't know about it yet. But on, Thursday and Friday, we learned that gusting wind is going to actually hit around 10 a.m. Maybe it's worth, having had lineups avoiding some of those Saturday stadium tee times. All right. But yeah, overall, it's fantastic weather. So let's go back to the Course Preview Pro. This is the main thing I wanted to talk. And actually, let's do one more thing. So if we go to the American Express, so this is our leaderboard. So you can see some like event analytics, weather conditions, stuff like that for any of the years for any tournament. So you can just search any tournament up here and go check it out. The thing I wanted to point to is if you go to strokes gained and you start to look through the leaderboards, you'll hear people talk about this all the time. And obviously, Fantasy Golf Bag has preached against this line of thought for several years now. But obviously, stats that you see in an event is not correlated with what that player's skill set is. So, for example, putting is a big one, right? If you're going to win this event and you're going to be 25, 29, 27, 23, 23, 26, 26, you're going to basically be 23 to 27 under par. Okay. Well, you're going to have to make some putts. But then we start to look at guys that came in, what their putting stats look like. There's no way you would have played the guys that were putting, that ended up putting well because their stats were so bad. There's leading correlations for a reason. So we'll talk about that in a second. But you can see Sepp Straka won this event. Ball striking wise, pretty good. Considering this is only the stadium course, which is 2 rounds, we're going to take it as if this was the full tournament, just for sake of argument. Justin Thomas, Justin Lauer, Patrick Cantley, all gaining about 3 to 4.5 strokes putting. That's just part of it. When you go here to, let's go back to 2024. We'll do the same thing. Again, even more kind of polarizing. You got Nick Dunlap gained 3, Bezadenhout gained 4, Xander gained 5, Sam Burns gained 4. And again, that's on 2 courses. We got Ben Griffin here gained 10. When we go to look at the Course Preview Pro, we look at the lead-in stats. Putting is the last stat as far as correlation. And we can also go down here to the actual past winners and what they had. Ball striking wise looks very good outside of a few guys like 7 years ago. But look through the putting numbers. Like overall through the putting numbers, we got some that were putting well, like John Rahm. We got Hudson Swafford negative, Andrew Landry negative, Adam Long strong negative. It's kind of all over the place. And if we go through the time machine and like the lead-in stat correlations, the ball striking stats, total strokes gained is the most dominant lead-in stat that you can consider. Putting is the least dominant in terms of correlation. So I wanted to point that out. When we built the the models last night for FGB Studio, really we just focused on 3 time frames, basically long term, all the rounds. So basically like the last year, long term in the last 36. So trying to capture a little bit more recent form, but in a longer term time frame. And then mid length, like the last 9 months, last 24 rounds. And then we're basically just hitting on total strokes gain, tee to green, bogey avoidance, strokes gained off the tee, green regulation. Pretty simple. Trying to pinpoint the putting, which we can go look at the time machine. You'll see the putting numbers for lead in for everybody. Like that was just the winners. You can go through any of these guys in the top 25 and you start to see there's really no correlation whatsoever with guys and where they finish in each of the years. Off the tee was actually pretty good. So I would encourage you obviously to use that. But then for putting, I mean, we got plenty of strong negatives, plenty of strong positives. They're all over the board. So I would not kind of hang your hat on just putting numbers as a sense of like, oh, this is who can spike. Now we do have a, if we go into FGB Studio, this is worth considering, and it's probably worth, weighting this a small amount. If we go to Spike IQ, you can see, how many guys gain over 2, 3, 4 strokes, 5 strokes, 6 strokes putting. So it's on total strokes gain. I'll just change it to putting. We'll do it over the last 2 years, and we'll just do all rounds. We'll apply that. So a lot of rounds, right? I mean, for putting, probably maybe a little bit of overkill for the last 2 years. You could probably just do the last 1 year. But all in all, this at least gives you an idea for how often somebody gains a bunch of strokes putting. So let's just say gains over, 2 is pretty good. We'll just do 2. So we'll make it simple. And we want a minimum of, let's just do 20 rounds. So your top guys, looking at this, Frankie Cappan, the third, Sam Burns, number 2, Wyndham Clark, Denny McCarthy, makes sense, Sam Ryder, Harry Hall, Pearson Cootie, Rasmus Hogard, Mackenzie Hughes, Kita Nakajima, Max Grieserman. So those are guys that have had the highest spike rounds over 2 strokes gain putting over the last 2 years in all their rounds. And it's pretty good sample size. We're talking, 100 to 170 rounds tracked. You can do over 3. Should be a lot of carryover. Yeah, Max Grieserman, Chris Ventura, Danny Walker, Jackson Suber, Sammy Valimaki, Denny McCarthy again, Rasmus Hogard. Surprising Rasmus Hogard's on here because you don't think about him as a putter, but he has the big spike rounds in terms of putting. Bo Hostler, Jesper Svensson, Sam Burns again. So like out of those 2 lists, Sam Burns, Max Grieserman, Rasmus Hogard, Denny McCarthy, those are guys that check both boxes in terms of kind of upside putting rounds. That's, I can find an argument to support that. But just using strokes gained putting overall, there's no correlation with good finish position by just looking at their strokes gained putting number at this point before they go play. Let's see if there's anything else. Again, the driving buckets approach was all for the stadium course. So 290 to 310, we have 8, very similar to last week. Approach distance is very, very staggered. 50 to 125 is 25%. 150 to 175 is 22%. And 200 plus, basically the par 5s and some par 3s, 27%. So essentially, if you can hit your long irons decent for the par 5s, and then 50 to 125 good with the wedges, you can have really good success here. And I think that's pretty much it. I guess course history would be the last thing to touch on. A lot of guys have played here over the years with really good history. You can do the top 10 finishers or top 25. So like looking here, Brian Harmon, the last 2 times he's played here, missed cut. He has 6 top 25s. Siwoo Kim has 5 top 25s with a win. JT Poston, Scotty Scheffler, Patrick Cantley. Let's do top 10s. I think Cantley's number 1 or 2. Yeah, Cantley's number 1. He's got 4 top 10s in the last 6 starts here. pretty good. Brian Harmon as well. Ben Griffin, really good. Sam Burns again pops. So I think Sam Burns is probably a worthwhile bet, and certainly a play this week. Sep Straka, Siwoo Kim, JT Poston, Scotty. I mean, Scotty's finishes here are actually pretty mediocre considering how good he is. And I think that just goes to the volatility of this golf course and the rotations for the golf course. So Scotty at 14-2 is probably a pass. He's still going to get plenty of ownership. His projections reflect such a good, obviously a good player, his good price tag. But yeah, I think landing on guys like, Sam Burns and Ben Griffin, maybe going a little bit more balanced and getting multiple guys inside the top 5 is probably the way to go instead of plugging in Scotty Scheffler at 14-2. That's just such a huge price tag. But yeah, you could go through the field history. You can look at guys with no missed cuts. Siwoo Kim is number 1. He has 8 made cuts. Patrick Cantley 6. Jason Day 4. No missed cuts. Pretty good. And I think that's it. We're at about 20 minutes. So hopefully that helps. Like I said, we'll do a full walkthrough, kind of building out everything in FGB Studio later. But just kind of wanted to hit on those key points for the golf courses, and then how best to approach it. So to kind of recap really quickly, as you dive into the Fantasy Golf Bag FGB Studio, total strokes gained tee to green, bogey avoidance, birdie or better, basically just scoring. Strokes gained off the tee and green and regulation. If you can include those 6 over various time frames, you're going to be in great shape. If you want to be a little bit greedy, you throw in the Spike IQ for putting. You could even do it on these golf courses over the last couple of years. Again, it would just be the stadium course. You could do it on green surface. Got any of those. You could change the stent meter. Doesn't really matter, but you can do that, or the time frame. So I think that's it for now, guys. Again, apologies for the first one getting cut off and having to make this nice, short and quick one. But hopefully that was some good information to help you out. There's not a ton from the golf course that can really guide us towards a specific strategy, but certainly guide us away from certain stats, and then just taking a more broad approach. And then for like the lead and stat correlations, like that's just a huge factor every week, is understanding like if everybody in the top 10 gained 3 strokes putting, but every one of them was losing strokes putting coming into this for the last 3 months or the last 6 months, then there's no way you're going to figure out who's going to gain strokes putting. So keeping that in mind, always beneficial from a data analysis standpoint, understanding the data that you have now and how is that predictable for what you see on Sunday. So with that being said, guys, I will sign off. We'll see you later today. Have a great Tuesday. Have a great week. We'll see you at fantasygolfbag.com.